The United States and China have officially urged their citizens to leave Iran immediately. And while the first direct talks between representatives of the United States and Iran were taking place today in Oman, new pockets of mass protest began to emerge once again in the Islamic Republic. At the same time, the United States of America and China have urged their citizens to leave Iran immediately. I'd like to note that today in Oman, the United States and Iran held hours-long nuclear talks. And now, officials from both countries have stated that they expect further meetings in the coming days. During the negotiations, Donald Trump's advisors Stephen Witkoff and Jared Kushner met directly with Iran's Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi. But at the same time as the negotiations, the United States imposed a new package of sanctions against the Ayatollah regime, and American troops continue to build up forces around Iran. And now, experts have calculated that over the past 2 weeks, more than 100 heavy transport aircraft, C-17S and C-5S of the United States Air Force, have already arrived or are still heading to Middle Eastern bases. And political analysts add that right now the regime in Tehran is at its weakest, and if a strike is to be carried out, now is the best time to do it. At the same time, it became known that Moscow was sending cash dollars to Iran, which indicates major problems in the Ayatollah regime's economy. Let's discuss the initial results of the United States-Iran direct talks in this episode. Why is Trump continuing to prepare a military operation? And why did China urge its citizens to urgently leave this country? My name is Alexei Pichi. Let's discuss this topic together. But before we start, I ask you to subscribe to this channel, like the video, leave any comment under this episode, and subscribe to my Telegram channel, Pichi News. The link to it is in the description of this video, where we publish breaking news as it comes in. So, on Friday in Oman, there were hours-long nuclear negotiations between the United States and Iran, and now officials from both countries say that they will continue in the coming days. During the negotiations, Donald Trump's advisors Stephen Witkoff and Jared Kushner met directly with Iran's Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi. These were the first face-to-face negotiations between the United States since the 12-day war in June of last year. They are taking place against the backdrop of a massive buildup of United States military power in the Persian Gulf, and against the backdrop of Donald Trump's warnings about the possibility of military action if an agreement is not reached in a short time. The Iranians really need to consider this, because experts have already calculated that in the past 2 weeks alone, a total of at least 102 flights of heavy C-17 and C-5 transport aircraft of the United States Air Force have already arrived, or are right now heading to Middle Eastern military bases. It is noteworthy that the main transportation hub in the Middle East has become the Mufaq Salti Air Base in Jordan, which accounted for about half of all deliveries. At the same time, cargo is also being received at Al Udeid in Qatar, Prince Sultan in Saudi Arabia, Ali Al Salem in Kuwait, and Diego Garcia in the Indian Ocean. As you can see, Americans are now boosting their military presence as much as possible at all available bases. The routes are set up both directly from the United States and via transit through Europe and Japan, including transfers from Kadena through Alaska. This indicates that the entire global logistics chain is being used to speed up the deployment of forces and resources to this region. In other words, the Americans are not just using traditional routes, but essentially all available routes today to do all this as quickly as possible. Against this backdrop, a series of flights to Jordan from military airfields in the United States stands out, which, based on indirect evidence, are related to the delivery of air defense system components. Patriot, possibly even terminal high-altitude area defense, and at least 7 such flights have already been recorded. Additionally, heavy C-5 Super Galaxy aircraft have arrived in Saudi Arabia, which are usually used to transport large equipment, radar systems, and other air defense components. All this indicates that Trump is really preparing for war if the regime does not make concessions. And against this backdrop, on Friday, the talks in Muscat began at 10 o'clock local time and ended around 18 o'clock, meaning they lasted a full 8 hours. Oman also served as a mediator between the two sides. The American delegation included Stephen Witkoff, Jared Kushner, and importantly, the commander of the United States Central Command, Admiral Brad Cooper. The Iranian delegation included Araghchi and several of his deputies. The main mediator was the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Oman, Badr al-Busaidi, and the latter described the negotiations as very serious and noted that both Iran and the United States, quote, clarified their positions and identified areas for possible progress. Arakchi said the negotiations were held in a very positive atmosphere and both sides' opinions were heard. And further, he said that he emphasized to the Americans that the negotiations, quote, should take place in a calm atmosphere without tension and threats. It's interesting that there were no official statements from the United States about how these negotiations went. The Americans remained completely silent. And here the intrigue was that the United States wanted to conduct negotiations in two directions. On one hand, about the nuclear issue, and on the other hand, about a broader range of topics, including ballistic missiles, that is, the missile program and the Iranian network of proxy forces in the Middle East. However, according to the same Arakchi, only the nuclear issue was discussed, and the issue of ballistic missiles and proxy forces was not raised. And this, by the way, really puzzled Israel because in their opinion, the threat needs to be addressed comprehensively. The United States also met Iran's demands to move the negotiations from Turkey to Oman and to exclude other Middle Eastern countries that intended to participate as observers from the talks. And so, American officials stated before the start of the negotiations that they agreed to Iran's preferred negotiation format in order to listen to the Iranians. But at the same time, they are skeptical about the possibility of a breakthrough, and that's why they continue to deploy troops to the region. Interestingly, it was during the negotiations in Oman between the American and Iranian delegations that the United States State Department announced new sanctions against Iran's shadow fleet, which illegally transports oil. This move, which includes sanctions against 15 organizations, 14 ships, and 2 individuals, is specifically aimed at Tehran's shadow fleet. And the Justice Department added that this is just the beginning. The profits from this kind of shadow trade are used to finance terrorist groups, those very proxy forces, and to destabilize the region. And now I'll quote the United States State Department. Instead of investing in the well-being of its own people and its crumbling infrastructure, the Iranian regime continues to fund destabilizing actions around the world and intensify repression inside Iran. And here I would like to say that Russia came to the aid of the Ayatollah regime. But that's not the case. The Telegraph reports that Russia secretly delivered billions of dollars in cash to Tehran. However, this didn't happen yesterday or even last year. As it became known, in 2018, Moscow transferred at least $2.5 billion in cash to the Republic of Iran to support the Ayatollah regime after the introduction of American sanctions. According to the materials, the Russian Pромsvyazbank played a key role in the deliveries, and in just 4 months of 2018 it made at least 34 shipments each ranging from $57 to $115 million. In total, almost 5 tons of banknotes were transported, presumably in 500 euro bills. And this money was used to finance proxy forces like Harakat al-Muqawama al-Islamiyya and Hezbollah. That's why Israel should think twice about whether it's worth dealing with the Russians at all. Well, let's see now if Russia will deliver cash to the Ayatollah regime this time as well. The Wall Street Journal reports that against this backdrop, the protest mood in Iran is once again growing, which could lead to a new wave of demonstrations. Funerals and memorial ceremonies often become places for expressing discontent and outrage, where relatives and friends of killed protesters chant anti-government slogans, including calls for death. Despite internet suppression, videos calling for the overthrow of Khamenei are still spreading. School children in Iran refuse to sing patriotic songs that praise Khamenei. Medical workers publicly condemn the arrests of their colleagues who provided aid to the wounded during the protests, and activist groups openly call for the overthrow of Khamenei. And, it should be admitted that right now perhaps Trump should take advantage of this rare opportunity. Iran hasn't been this weak in 45 years of facing the United States. Why do I think that? Let's review the reasons. First, the future of the Ayatollah's revolutionary regime is clouded by a succession crisis that undermines its aura of stability. The elderly Ayatollah Ali Khamenei cannot rule forever, and so far there is no one to take his place. He has sons, but they are not considered successes at all. Second, the crisis of political legitimacy has never been this acute. Extreme despair and hopelessness forced protesters to take to the streets amid shortages of food, water, medicine, and harsh economic conditions. This situation remains unchanged, even though the January protests were suppressed. And third, there are Iran's regional proxy forces, including Hamas in the Gaza Strip, Hezbollah in Lebanon, and the Houthis in Yemen, which once offered a kind of insurance against external attacks on Iran. They have essentially been defeated by wars with Israel, and Iran no longer has this external ring of protection. Because previously, Iran used to direct these proxy forces to attack Israel and to attack American military bases. And the idea was that the enemies would be distracted by confronting these forces, but they have been greatly weakened. And these three factors, at the very least, create a logical justification for United States military action against Iran. Perhaps now is the best time for Washington to overthrow the regime. The Ayatollah, who pursued him in Middle Eastern politics, threatened his allies and killed many Americans both through terrorist acts and with militants during the war in Iraq, for example. But it should be remembered that the longer Trump delays the strike and negotiates with the Iranians, the more time the Ayatollahs themselves have to strengthen their power again. Well, in the meantime, the United States and China have officially urged their citizens to leave Iran as soon as possible. I'll leave it at that. Share your opinions and conclusions in the comments below this episode, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell, and don't forget to like. If you found this episode interesting and useful, you can support the work of this YouTube channel with any donation or subscription using the links and details in the description of this video. I appreciate any support. That's all for now. Take care. Goodbye, everyone.